It's the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. I'm your host, Sean, and follow the podcast on all the major platforms. Subscribe on YouTube or visit thegermanyexperience.de. And what you may not know is that last week was the second anniversary of the Germany Experience podcast. We've turned 2. The first episode went up on 29th of May, 2019, and here we are, 2 years later. And the podcast means the world to me for many reasons. I probably don't need to say that. I've said it enough in the past, but it does. It means the world to me. But there are 2 people, or should I say 2 groups of people, that I want to thank for these last 2 years. First of all, you for listening. The fact that anyone would take time out of their schedule to listen to this podcast, it just continuously blows my mind. And you have no idea how much I appreciate you listening. You have no idea. You just don't, you think you do. You think, okay, I hear what he's saying. He appreciates it. You still don't. You don't have any idea how much I appreciate it. So thank you for listening. And I hope it's time well spent. You're taking time out of your schedule. And if it's not, if you ever have any feedback or questions or suggestions, just mail me at info@thegermanyexperience.de. And then I have to thank every guest that has ever come on this podcast in the 2 years, because it's the guests actually who make this show what it is. I always say I have the easy part and my guests have to do all the heavy lifting. So thank you to the guests. Now, over 2 years, we've heard so much great advice and insights from the guests that what I decided to do as kind of a birthday celebration is to put together an episode of some of the advice that guests have given over the past 2 years. And so it would be pretty impossible for me to make a compilation of every bit of advice. But what I've done for this episode is collect the advice that some of my guests give me at the end of their interview when I ask them for their most important bit of advice they can give foreigners in Germany. Now, this by no means is a comprehensive list of advice that has come up in this podcast. There is tons, and I just couldn't put it all in one episode. And that's why there are 85 other podcast episodes for you to get through. So if you haven't listened to them, go back and listen. There's a lot of stuff that you can learn from my guests over those 85 episodes. But what you'll hear in this episode is just some of the advice that either stood out, or it made me laugh, or it echoed the sentiments of other guests that keep coming up over the run of the podcast. So a good place to start, I guess, because it's the anniversary episode, is with my first ever guest. It was Dwight Boniecki, an Australian who directed a documentary called Searching for Skylab about the 1970s space station. And his advice has to do with dealing with officials at the Ausländerbehördeamt.
Have patience. Have patience with the German authorities. It has gotten me great service. Don't go in there and like every other German, the Behörde here, all they do is sit around twiddling their thumbs, right?
Yeah.
You go in there and you say, I admire you for your patience. There's a lot of people here that would drive me crazy, and I know you're just doing your job, and I need your help.
Yeah,
right.
They do.
The second you say that, they just sit back and go, somebody gets it, what it's like being in our position where we have to deal with all these people day after day.
Audrey from the USA had a similar approach. Have empathy.
I think my advice could be pretty general, but I will make it specific to this. And it is that you just don't know the battle the other person's fighting in public and in private. And then take that to another level of you also are never going to fully understand the depths of the culture you're in unless you've been there for 50 years, maybe even longer than that. I just really believe that.
Yeah, I agree with you there, because I've been here for 12 years now, and I still feel like an outsider, and I still miss references and cultural insights. And yeah, you're right.
You're just not going to get those nuances, and to be okay with that. It's really okay, because you can still respectfully enjoy your life without understanding everything that everyone's going through or has been through.
And Audrey's advice is something that has stuck with me. I think it's a great bit of wisdom that you don't have to understand everything to have a good life here. You might think so in the beginning, but actually you can get along with not knowing everything about the culture or understanding the people 100%. So that was great advice from Audrey. Now, the next bit of advice comes from a more recent episode that went out towards the end of last year in 2020. It's from Jenna from Canada, who is also the host of the Life in Germany YouTube channel, and it has to do with experiencing the best of Germany before you make your decision of whether you want to stay here and continue the German experience. Not the podcast, but your time in Germany.
Do not move here in January or February. I'm not kidding when I say this. Like, I've had my fair share. I talk to expats not only in Düsseldorf, but from around Germany now. And from what I've seen and from what I've experienced, there are so many of them who basically give up halfway through their relocation process because they just haven't been able to experience the best of Germany when they first got here. And I think as important as it is to go through the entire relocation process and fill out all your paperwork and everything, it is just as important to make sure that you enjoy your life here in Germany before getting started. So if you can, also like come over for a month beforehand, or don't start work right away, and really get to know Germany for what it is, because there are so many travel opportunities here, even in the middle of a pandemic, like there are so many places to see, even in my own city or in your own town. And 30-minute drive, like for me, I drive 30 minutes and I'm in the Netherlands, or I drive 40 minutes and I'm in Belgium. And this goes for pretty much anywhere where you live in Germany. We're surrounded by amazing, beautiful countries, and there's just so much to experience and so many beautiful little towns here and whatnot. So if you can get a little bit of that as a taste, then you can jump into your relocation process, get all that paperwork done, and really get a fresh, good, healthy start here in Germany. And then also look forward to, well, what else do I want to see here? What else do I want to experience?
I think this is a great point, because if you make sure you experience some good things about Germany, I think it can help you get through the rough times that do inevitably come with integrating. So that is great advice from Jenna. One of my favorite things about this podcast is when I get to chat with friends of mine, and it's happened a few times over the course of the podcast. And it's always different when I get to speak to people who I've known for a longer period of time. Natalie from the UK was one of those people, and I interviewed her just before she left Germany after 10 years here. And she and I both agree, foreigners don't need advice.
Well, I mean, to be fair, these people now have smartphones and everything else.
There we go. Don't need any help. Good luck, kids.
Just rely on your
Google Maps, WhatsApp, and Facebook. You're set.
Yeah.
We didn't have that.
God.
We didn't have that.
You can ask Google what to do. Don't ask me.
I came here and I had to use maps, like fold-out maps, big paper maps and
exactly.
books.
What? Really?
You get no advice, kids. You're right, Natalie. Screw you guys.
Figure it out.
You've got everything. Okay.
Everyone figures stuff out their own way.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess it's like it depends on the person. And you, like I say, you do all figure it out in your own way and you'll find a way. But I definitely think these expat groups that I was involved in, any kind of group really, where you're integrating, because these expat groups, by the way, the English Stammtisch that I did was not just expats, it was also Germans, which I liked about that, because there was often, expats arranging language exchange with Germans so they could improve their German. So there was all of that going on. That really helped me, at least, to integrate. So I would say
do that. Get those meetups.
Try and find somewhere that offers that.
And joining expat groups is advice that often pops up in the advice given on this podcast. And of course, those groups are a big way to prepare you for life in Germany before you even get here. And then, of course, once you're here, they're a good source of information and you can ask questions to specific problems that you have. Now, for foreigners who have not yet moved to Germany, but who are planning to do so, the general advice is prepare beforehand. I had several guests who gave this advice. For example, Emma is a dancer from the US who moved to Germany, and she believes it is important to start networking before you even leave.
If you know anyone here, just send them a message and just ask them, because I knew on one hand 5 people who were in Berlin who I also knew were on this visa, which I have. And I asked them, and I'm not kidding you, I've only met with each of them maybe once or twice in my entire 13 months in Berlin. Right. But I am so grateful to them for having like given me the resource or like told me about the website or told me about like this thing that then made it so much easier for me to deal with like the bureaucracy and deal with like getting connected in the dance community.
And of course, that bureaucracy is also something that you can try and prepare for. Here is Amy from Canada talking about preparing for exactly that.
Be prepared for the bureaucracy. I know I've mentioned that a few times throughout this recording, but I can't reiterate enough just how bureaucratic Germany really is, and everything you can conceivably do to make sure that you have a prepared application is going to be in your favor. Sometimes even if the clerk is just having a bad day and you're missing something that might not even be essential, but they'd prefer to have, maybe they just decide, you know what, you don't get your visa.
Yeah.
So it's best to just be as thorough as humanly possible. Germans are all about efficiency. And if you can demonstrate that and be on your A game and be on top of what you need to have, that's the best advice I can give.
And of course, as part of your preparations for moving to Germany, you can also listen to podcasts like this one. Back when this podcast first started, I did an episode about scams in Germany and things that might catch foreigners out. And then I happened to see a post by a foreigner named Sarah who told a story of how she'd almost been the victim of a scam. So I got her on the podcast for a bonus episode about the details of her scam. And then she was later a guest on the podcast. It was Sarah, who is from many different places, including Syria and Canada. And here's her advice.
I would tell them, listen to these podcasts.
Yeah, you should tell them to specifically this one.
This one in specific.
Yeah,
I think joining the Facebook expats pages for Berlin or reading more about it, asking more people, and not just asking your friends, because sometimes people give you opinions that are incorrect. So joining expat pages and asking beforehand, like things that you might need to maybe make an appointment before you come, or maybe you should search for homes before coming, or all these kind of things that you should probably mentally be prepared for before coming to Berlin. Get those questions asked on those pages or friends or through podcasts. It's so important. Coming here with no idea is going to be still okay, but it's not going to be as smooth sailing as it would have if you would have been prepared.
Another thing that you definitely should take into account when preparing to move to Germany is the amount of money you will need when you get here. Greg and Brigitte left California for Germany, and they only brought 1,500 euros with them. Take a listen to their advice about this.
Have a bigger nest egg. I think that would definitely help.
Not like you guys just come here with nothing and nothing to fall back on.
Right? We're on the airplane with our dogs and flying over here with just suitcases and stuff.
No plans.
I'm sure a bigger nest egg would have made the first few years more enjoyable. But
well, at least in terms of trying to find an apartment.
Right.
Because oftentimes you have like the 2 to 3 months rent.
Oh yeah, the deposit that you need to put down is pretty.
And in between the costs of moving and the cost of like the plane tickets and things like that. Yeah, we came over here with essentially like, I think it was like $1,500.
Yeah.
And then we tried to rent an apartment there. Just like, well, we need 3 months rent. And we're just like, is this cool?
Like, how about this?
Yeah, no, and again, we got lucky because her aunt and uncle were just like, hey, we'll kind of vouch for them.
Okay.
And so that was the only reason we actually got that apartment. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're going to do that really on your own,
just big of a nest egg.
Yeah, you need a bit more cash, honestly.
Yeah.
Or smaller, minuscule apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Greg and I have like especially coming from Southern California, a standard of living. And I was like, okay, this is our basic, this is where I want to start at. But we could have done with less. I'm sure we could have done with way less.
Yeah.
We've acquired way more since we've been here, but don't fight it. I mean, Greg and I, we've been up and down and good and bad sides. And one thing that we've always fallen back on is don't fight what feels right, what feels natural.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're still in Germany.
Don't fight what feels natural. But it might not be natural for everyone to move to Germany or to move to another country even. Here is some great advice from Liliana from Italy.
I would say it's not for everyone to move. That's something I also had to realize, because at the beginning I was telling everybody, oh, you have to move abroad, it's amazing. But it's not for everyone. I think you should feel this willing to discover a new culture and not just go there for a job, because then it would be very frustrating. You should feel motivated to integrate in the culture and not just stay the, I don't know, Italian, Spanish, whatever person you were. And also be very open-minded and don't look at other users as strange and bad users. Just look at that with curiosity and see what can be maybe good for you too, if you change that habit. Otherwise, you go back in 2 months, probably.
So while moving abroad might not be for everyone, there were some guests who felt that you should just do it. And here's Vlad from Romania, who was one of those guests.
Listen to other people's experience, but not necessarily think of it like, what if that happens to me as well?
Yeah.
Listen to it. That way you're going to be prepared. You're going to know what to expect. And just do it. Anybody that wants to emigrate anywhere, just do it.
Yeah.
You don't really have much to lose. And you're not giving up your citizenship or anything like that. If you want to go back home, you probably can go back home anytime. Yeah. But everybody should do it. What do you have to lose? You only have to gain. It's an experience.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to, I don't know, break up rocks with your bare fists. And anything else, it's just going to be an experience.
I would also advise against that kind of international experience.
Right.
Yeah. And for the record, I will still advise against any international experience that involves breaking rocks with your hands. I'm just going to put that out there in case you're thinking about it. But following on from Vlad's question of what do you have to lose, Thomas from the UK believes that you don't have to come to Germany expecting to stay forever. So you can actually just have in mind it's a temporary thing. If I like it, I'll stay. If not, I can just go home, and you've lost nothing. Here is Thomas talking about that option, but also what happens if you decide you want to stay.
I think I've got two stages to my one bit of advice.
All right.
The first one is, don't worry about it. You can come here and not necessarily have a plan to stay here. But if you do fall in love with the place, make the commitment and get a routine where you are learning German every single day, because it can be very easy and tempting to just speak English, because more or less everybody can. But if you get into that routine, then after a couple of years, you'll have this eureka moment, and you'll realize, I understand everything that this particular TV program is saying. Or I can have a conversation with someone about, I can do small talk in German.
Yeah.
And the sense of achievement and liberation that brings is really quite impressive. And it's definitely something that people should give a go.
And of course, that brings me to the German language. Now, almost every single episode of the podcast has some advice about learning German, and that would be a clip show on its own. So I just chose to do 2 bits of advice about this. And the first comes from Laurie from the USA, another of my very early guests. Laurie teaches English in Germany, but has an opinion that applies to learning German too. She believes that fluency is more important than accuracy when it comes to learning a language, depending on your goals. And here is what she tells her students.
You have to decide what the people really need.
Yeah.
If they just want to talk, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And there's a big discussion, and you have to ask your students what they want. Do they want accuracy or do they want fluency?
Interesting that you say that, because I found my German started improving. In the beginning, it was very difficult to get to a certain point, but I only went to the next level of German when I just stopped trying to be accurate. And I just said, okay, I'm going to talk, and whatever articles I get wrong or whatever I say that's wrong, everyone's going to have to live with it. And suddenly there, my German actually started improving, because I was speaking a lot more and saying a lot more things and just throwing it out there. And then I must say, I did like the Germans to correct me when I was learning.
I don't anymore. Don't correct me, please.
Really?
No.
I just
no,
want to say
it's
my
as
stuff.
as far as I'm going to get. I tell my students, if you have to get good pronunciation, if your pronunciation is good, people will listen to you longer than if you have really good grammar, but fingernail on the blackboard pronunciation.
That's good advice too.
Yeah. And I think part of the problem is in school, we're penalized for every mistake we make. If you make a mistake on a test, you get a red mark. So people are afraid in speaking. They're afraid to make a mistake because in the past in school, you've always been penalized, and they have to realize you're not
this isn't school.
No, if I don't understand you, I say, excuse me, you know, it's like, or I screw up my face, so I need Botox, you know. But I tell my people, my German's not perfect. I use lots of de.
Right.
Which is not der or de. Yeah, I said the Germans fill in the blank. You just have to speak fast enough and be able to have something that people want to listen to.
Yeah. Along those same lines, here's advice from Marie from the USA, who is the author of The God Queen, a novel that has since been published since I interviewed her for my podcast. And this is her advice about speaking German.
To not worry about making mistakes when you're learning the language. Mm-hmm. That was a big thing because, I mean, for me, because technically German is my third language. Growing up, I had to, speak English and Spanish, and actually my mother would send me to Peru by myself in order to better my Spanish.
Wow.
And to not allow me to speak English to anybody. Huh. So I had to get over that first learning curve very young, where it doesn't matter if you're grammatically correct. You just have to speak. You have to just get those words out. Eventually, once you have that confidence, later on, you can focus on the grammar. But until then, just speak, just get out there, and ignore the weird looks you may get from that small percentage of people that that just don't understand, because most people, they will try to help you. They they do appreciate that you're wanting to learn their language, and they will try to find a way to meet you halfway.
Yeah. And that is my biggest advice as well. Just say stuff in German. Just speak German. Don't worry about the grammar. Don't worry about making mistakes. Just speak. And of course, learning the language is an important aspect of making friends with Germans. It's a topic that also comes up a lot on the podcast because it's notoriously difficult. A very recent guest, Kerry from the UK, talks about this.
If you really want to connect with people anywhere you are in the world, it's learning the language is the key to that. And I really appreciate that for me was an important part of moving abroad, was reaching out, going outside of the work network and the bubble, and building up contacts outside. And for language learning, I think always finding a tandem partner to start with, that you're not only practicing the language, but you're getting that connection to the culture through that, and a friend through that way. And then the other thing I'd suggest is finding something that you're either passionate about. Like for me, it was the mountains, and I knew that I wanted to get involved in the mountains, so I went to the German Alpine Club. But whatever you're passionate about, or finding a new hobby and starting something new.
And that is really one of the best pieces of advice on making friends in Germany. Find your tribe. One of the first guests to offer this advice was Tim from France, way back in 2019.
In my living room, the poster from Holsti. Holsti is I think a New York company, and they have written a manifesto a few years back, which was the values of the company, and it starts with, "This is your life. Do what you love and do it often." And somewhere in there, it says, "Stop looking for the love of your life. Start doing the things you love, and he or she will be waiting you there," which is a very great advice, I think, and doesn't apply only to searching the love of your life. Searching for friendship is not a thing that you do. You start doing the things you love, and the people that you meet there will be the persons that you end up being friends with. If you have kids, well, that's quite often where it starts. You start spending time with your kids, and obviously you have a lot of fun with this, and you meet parents from other kids, and that's how you make friends. Or you do some sports or extra activities, and you meet people there, and those become your friends. So on a general sense, making friends in Germany, I think, was pretty much like making friends anywhere in the world. As soon as you get over the language barrier, because there is a language barrier, there is such thing, then it's quite easy. You just have common interests, and off you go.
And off you go. And now here is Beth from the USA giving her advice on this.
Gosh, I would say find a club, get into find your people, find your tribe as soon as you can. Find a way to connect. Because I've known people that have moved over and moved back almost instantly because they didn't, find it for whatever the reasons are. But generally, the common thread there was no connection to this place. And I think for those of us who I know I'm here for quite a while, so yeah.
That helps.
It helps to be connected with people or clubs or this town you live in or whatever it is. Find a way to find your way to be connected.
Anna from Canada, who was on my podcast after she gave a TEDx talk about the power of connections in our lives, talks about finding points of commonality.
Well, I think one of the things that we just touched on is realizing that you have to have patience, obviously, with your German friendships, and that the expat friendships might happen a little bit faster. But I think the main thing is to find where you have points of commonality with others so that you can build a sense of connection around them. And there are a lot of things going on in Germany around their hobbies, clubs, sports, vereins. There you can meet parents at the school where your children go, language courses or groups, any kind of shared activities, because what seems to really help is just doing something together or having an interest that you have in common. And for me, the thread in every single foreign country that I've lived in, except for the United States, is I've always done volunteering with the American International Women's Clubs. And that satisfied a lot of different needs I had, not just social connection and activities, but also charity activities as well, and sort of being aware of what's going on where you live and where you can make a difference. And that's been huge for me.
It came up there with Anna, and it's come up dozens of times before. Join vereins or groups based on a hobby or an interest. I mean, there's literally vereins for everything. I think a guest once told me that there is a verein for growing potatoes, for example. In my area, there's a tractor verein. Whatever your interest is, chances are there's a verein or a group or something based around it. Find it, go there. It's going to get easy now that the COVID restrictions are lifting somewhat in Germany. Go to the vereins and you stand a good chance of making friends there. Now, one of the biggest challenges when you integrate into a new culture is staying true to yourself. And one of my guests, Tanya, has lived in many different places, but she has always identified as a Kenyan. And she spoke about remaining authentic.
Stay true to yourself. That's something that I struggled with in the beginning because I was trying to adjust so much that I kind of lost myself. But never forget where you came from, who you are. Just always stay true to yourself and be very authentic.
Alicia, who is from the USA and who has an EP out now, by the way, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes, also talks about how to not lose yourself in Germany.
Find ways to stay connected to home, because oftentimes that's what gives us the strength to keep going. So if that means, talking with a friend from home once a week, then do that. If that means, watching like your favorite show from home or cooking meals from home. I know for me, that was important to eat like home cooked meals of, very American food. But yeah, find ways to stay connected to home and just be patient. Like embrace your new life, your new space, but you have to find ways to stay happy and stay inspired, and that way you won't feel so alone. You don't have to, just because you move to a new country, it doesn't mean you have to completely strip yourself of your identity. You can still be you. You can still be involved with home to a certain degree.
Among all the great advice my guests have taken from their own experiences, there is often very practical advice. And I don't think we ever got more practical advice than this from Amy from the USA.
I did come up with a piece of advice just for anybody that's coming.
Yeah, let's hear it.
And it's very practical. And it's something, it's kind of the one thing that has annoyed me a little bit about living here. And that is that everything is always closed. So check the time, the opening hours, assume it's closed. And then when you get there and it's open, you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Just rejoice.
I can't tell you how many times I've shown up somewhere and it's like, why is it closed? Because it's a Wednesday afternoon and they wanted to. And you just
I don't know how it is in your village, but in my village, there's some of the places close from 12 to 2 or from 11 to 3. You have no idea. You have no idea.
Shifts. It's sort of like it is lunchtime. And so we will all be taking lunch.
Yes.
And it's just closed. And get used to that and know when things are open.
That is very practical, Amy. That is on the nose and very practical. And this, you see, folks, that's what you get from this podcast. You get takeaway advice. Shaked is a dancer from Israel who was on my show, and she discussed how she imagined the whole of Germany would be like the big cities, like Berlin or Hamburg. She ended up in a smaller city, and this is what advice she has about that.
First of all, I have to say, like, just be aware that Germany is for me as Israeli, it's a huge place, right?
Yeah.
It's a big place, and it has variety of cultures and identities and different relations with arts and also with international people. So understand that, do not expect any place to be like Hamburg or Berlin or Köln or whatever. That's the first thing. And second thing, I would advise just to try to work on networking as soon as possible and with everyone, even if they're totally unrelated to your profession, or to just start to get to know people, because I started late, and I think this would have been something that could help me more to get to more places, to get more jobs, and to assimilate a little bit more in the culture and in the place where I live.
And what Shaked's saying there is something that also comes up quite a lot. It's quite a common bit of advice, is that you need to be flexible. And here's Fiona from the UK talking about that.
Always remain flexible with your thoughts. Don't listen to stereotypes, because you'll probably find that they're pretty much not true. And things may not go the way that you're expecting them to, but it's not the end of the world. There is always a path forward from where you are.
Another recent guest, Lawan from the Philippines, also spoke about having an open mind.
You have to come to Germany with an open mind. Obviously, like we were talking about these preconceived notions, you'll always have them. Like you said, it could be like superseded, or it could be you're totally wrong about a notion. But don't let those kind of notions scare you about like moving or making that trip or making that big move of yours.
And here's another long-term friend of mine, Rafael, who is from Brazil, giving his thoughts on this topic.
Be open for the Germans, for their culture. Please learn the language, and don't get mad about their way of being, because you probably have your own way of being, and this would also be strange for them. It's normal. It's going to be different because it's another culture, it's another country, and just be open-minded and be happy.
Be happy. And I cannot think of anyone more suited to give that advice than Rafael. So be happy. And our last clip comes from Christy, the Southern liberal from the USA that many, many listeners have told me they connected with, related to, and just loved. She said in her episode that you're either going to love her or hate her. And it just turns out that many of the listeners actually really liked Christy. Here's Christy's advice about keeping an open mind.
Be open. Don't let your ego get in the way. Sometimes when we're somewhere new,
our ego gets involved somehow. Either we feel small, or we feel like we don't understand, or maybe we don't fit in, or I don't know, just kind of try to roll with it.
Just kind of roll with it. And that is exactly what I am going to keep doing with this podcast. I'm just going to kind of keep on rolling with it. It's been such a fun 2 years, and I truly hope you'll stay with me to hear the advice of all the future guests that are going to come on this podcast. And by the way, if you want to be on the podcast, get in touch with me at info@thegermanyexperience.de. As I said at the beginning, thank you for listening. Until next week, when I introduce you to a brand new book for foreigners in Germany, Auf Wiederhören.